Om vacha nyachatmani tam nyacham. Buddhao diyam. Yacha cha buddhi sakshini. Tam chapi punatmani nirvikalpe. Vilapya shantim parnamam bhajasva. Om shantihi, shantihi, shantihi. The practitioner of blissful dissolution dissolves the word into the mind into the intellect into the ego into the witness into the Atman, and the Atman into Brahman. Brahman is the soul in all. In this way does that practitioner experience eternal peace and ecstatic bliss. Om peace, peace, peace. Om pramadina sandeha kim karishyami vrittiman. Utpadyante vilyante buddhascha yata jale. Om shanti, shanti, shanti. Verily, ignorance is unreal. Then how can it cause any real doubt? Therefore, what does the yogi do with his mind and its projections? He allows them to rise naturally and dissolves them back into the mind like bubbles into water. Om peace, peace, peace. Om Sahana, Om Sahana Vavatu, Sahana Bhunaktu, Saha Viryam Karavavahai, Tejasvi Navaditamastu Ma Vidveshovahai. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. May Brahman, divine reality, protect us. May it sustain us. May it illumine our thinking process. May we not find fault with each other, with the world, or with the teachings. And may what we study be a source of inspiration to us eternally. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om. Welcome and mahalo, which is thank you in Hawaiian, as we come to you from the Hawaiian Islands here for our what is hoped to be final class on the Akshi Upanishad. I've set it up so that I think we can cover just a certain amount of slokas, which is something like 7 slokas in these 3 hours we're about to undertake. All of them headed towards the 7th stage of the 7 stages of yoga in the Akshi Upanishad. We know about the 8 limbs of yoga, which is purely yogic. This is more yoga as a view from the Upanishads, and so if we've studied it, we can see that it has less emphasis on practice, as Patanjali's yoga does, like the first 4 limbs, very much practices of observances and morals and ethics and posture and breathing, leading up to finally getting to the mind and neutralizing its thoughts. But with the Akshi Upanishad, from the sun god, as he delivered it to that rishi, Samkriti, has been reporting on it to us, and we can see that this is really leaning more towards practice of the mind, right from the very beginning, which was crossing transmigratory existence. It means really you can be here in the body, there's no shame to that, no guilt to that. Hopefully there's no karma to it either, though. is that you can live in a karmaless state and pass your time contentedly and be free, as Shankara has told us about in the Viveka Chudamani scripture. Of course, in order to do that, you're going to have taken what's external and internal and rendered them into one state. So it's all leading towards this recognition of oneness, and probably another word for oneness would be transcendence. As lately I've been, and I have a chart today on it, talking about the revelation of, India's revelation of formless awareness, which may be inferred in other religions, but nowhere is it focused upon, like in India. And so there's even some things to say about formless awareness. The last two slokas of the Akshi Upanishad finally takes that up. The three prior to it, guess what? Om. So it sort of heads in all 7 stages, from the first to the 7th, it heads toward recognition of the word, which I was just chanting about, and then leading to formlessness. So the word would be in the beginning, as Jesus said. So that's the origin of everything. If he wasn't talking about the Almighty Father or the Great Spirit when he was talking about in the beginning was the Word. He was talking about the Word. That's the origin of everything, not God. God cannot be the origin of anything. It can be the backdrop, and must be the backdrop to everything. The substratum, sometimes they call it. Kutastha, or Kutastha Nietzsche, the eternal substratum of everything. But it doesn't join in the fray into the party of form, and all different levels of form, which I can show you at the end in the second half. So stay with us until then. You can see this new chart that I've created called India's Revelation of Formless Awareness. It's unique in all the world, even in religions such as Islam and so forth, and Judaism, that declare a monotheistic God. We always find that God ending up having something to do with heaven, as far as location goes, and something to do with a form, as far as their God goes. And so to get beyond location, space, and time and form, let's just throw in name too, and cause and effect, karma. Those are the fivefold Maya. So it's very rare to get a philosophy that thinks beyond Maya, thinks outside the box. Since the mind is in Maya, it thinks inside of that box, and thinks on it in some 5, 6, 7 levels. If you look at Kundalini system, or at the Dvipas, the worlds inside of you, the Locus, the Akashas, the 5 Akashas, you see that form is getting finer and finer in them, but it's always some sort of clinging to it, to the extent that basically even philosophers are thinking form, religions are thinking form, God has a form, and that's fine, but God is formless as well, India says, and that's beyond all akashas, beyond space. It's called the Mahakasha, actually, by the great master. So we will look at that and sort of giving a little preview of what's going to happen in these 3 hours, leading to the final 2 slokas of our Akshi Upanishad, which I'm bound to determine, or we will complete it today, and then be able to look back on a series of a dozen or more classes, maybe several dozen, that we've taken over the years, and then eventually pick up another Upanishad to start studying it, another one of the quote-unquote minor Upanishads that Shankara didn't comment on, so that we have a real well-rounded look at Vedanta. Vedanta means Vedas, Anta. What's at the end of the Vedas? What's at the end of the Vedas is 108 Upanishads, that's what. And that's where non-duality in India dwells. That, and in the Brahma Sutras, which are very difficult to comment on and to read even. They don't even make sense much in English when you read them. You really need a guide for that. The closest thing we can get to a guide for non-duality is Sri Krishna and the Bhagavad Gita. So those 3 scriptures, Upanishads, and Bhagavad Gita and Brahma Sutras, are called the Prasthanatrayam, the 3 great landmarks in scriptural history. So that's where you're going to get non-duality mostly in a scripture, because you don't find it, it's not just in the minds of the philosophers or in the content of religion, it's really not that much in the minds of the saints either. Saints meaning Catholicism and Christianity and prophets and so forth. If it's there, it's not talked about. And maybe that's on purpose. No judgment there, but we do go to a great affirmation of formless awareness when we look into great teachings that are specifically called non-dual scriptures. So that's where they're called the revealed scriptures instead of fundamentalist or dualistic or qualified non-dualistic. Those help people too sometimes, but there are some specific scriptures and some stotrams which I can sing, of course, and often do, that point directly to this realmless realm of formless awareness, where my mind became like a bird flying in the sky of the great Akasha, Sri Ramakrishna said. So you do have a couple of very exemplary souls, very high-minded, who have reached a non-dual level and have come back, which is hard to do too, and helped explain a little bit about what they experienced there. It's hard because the experiencer goes away there too. So that's probably where this witness consciousness comes in handy. Is that if you have a platform where you can go into merging and then come back, not to the ego, but to the witness, as we just chanted, you dissolve the ego into the witness and the witness into the Atman. So if you have a platform where you shift back and forth in your high-minded meditations, and you're touching into Samadhi, which is the last word used in this scripture, almost the last word in it is Samadhi. They're calling it a certain kind of concentration, but the Sun God is telling Samkriti, you have to set that concentration up with all this teaching I gave you beforehand. All these other stages are necessary, or the Samadhi won't stick. You won't go into it again. You'll just glimpse it once. So all of that comes over the next few slokas, and I have certain teachings we can stop and help unwrap them with. But as you remember last week, we got as far as completing the 6th stage. So in an Upanishad that has only 48 slokas, we reached up till 40. And let me read you stage 6, and look at this real quick. See how fewer and fewer become the bullet points which you can describe the stage with. But Sun God tells Samkriti, where there is neither non-existence nor existence, neither the I nor the non-I, with all analytic thinking gone away, one remains alone, totally fearless in non-duality. That's at the 6th level here. We call it Jivan Mukti. The living liberated soul, if you had words to describe him or her with, that would be the way, the Sun God, the God of light, a traveler of the skies, would tell you if you ask him about it. As far as a stage goes there, you can see that if you come to the Jivan Mukta stage, it's also concluded there for you. Get my copy up here. You can see there that abides in fearlessness. That's everyone do this. That's Abaya. That's Divine Mother Kali holds that there, and then her other. We don't have forearms, so we can't quite do it. But our lower right arm would be the opposite of that, which means gifts, giving boons. Varada Mudra, this is called, and that mudra is Abaya Mudra. So you're free of Maya, fear. So, and her other two hands of holding the sword of wisdom and the skull, the severed head. So that's Mother Kali's telling us, take refuge in me. I will give you boons. You'll become fearless. I'll take your ego with a sword of wisdom, and you and I will be at one-ment again. I'll read you a sloka of two from the Yoga Sutras at the end of the class, where Patanjali is talking about Chitti Shakti, how she takes over all processes toward the end of such a process like this. So fearlessness, important. Sees only oneness everywhere. So that's, make sure you don't think of that just as numerical oneness, like, oh, there were two, now there are one. But an all-pervasive oneness. It's like homogeneity. It's impossible to separate out anymore one thing from another, which of course is not true with the worlds. The grosser and grosser the worlds become, down to the physical Loka here, the more everything gets differentiated, the more there is to describe about it. That means the more there is to get lost in. Like if you go to what's his name? Origin of Evolution. Yeah, if you're Darwin and you go to the Galapagos Islands, you see, oh boy, there you go. Start all over again into Maya, with all the new species that are coming forth, giving you some secret in nature and so forth. If he gave a lecture to a room full of Knowers of Brahman, he'd look up from his paper 10 minutes later, they'd all be asleep, or yawning, because there's nothing new under the sun. The only thing that really has a deep mystery is the self, how deep the self is. And it's not the self that goes and explores the worlds and comes from the worlds. It's the worlds that came out of the self. So if you're studying them, it's just for a matter of fact to show you that that's your manifestation, and that's how much power your mind has, the collective mind has, the cosmic mind has. And then this is all supposed to be dissolved back into you, word to mind to intellect to ego. At about that point, it gets good for the Knowers of Brahman, because then they find the witness. That's a nice perch, to philosophically speaking, to light on. And you can look both ways from the witness, out to the worlds and inward to the Atman, or to the light, ocean of light, to that sky of awareness, the Mahakasha. And that's what they do. And if they pause there, it means they're going to come back to earth to help you attain that higher view yourself, bring you to their perch. You know the story in the Upanishads, probably the most famous one is the two birds sitting on a tree. You've all heard that one, I think. And the bird on the lower branches is eating fruit, and the fruit's sometimes sweet, sometimes rotten, and it doesn't get much sunlight down there. But every once in a while it looks up to the upper bird that's just sitting regally there, not eating anything, and just basking in the sunlight. And so finally, enough of this lower branch dwelling, it flies up and sits next to the bird on the upper branch and goes into Samadhi with it, as it were. So that's the soul trying to free itself from the fetters. Strike off thy fetters, bonds that bind thee down, and get to a higher state where the self is all in all, none else exists, and I am that. And that's the whole purpose for dipping down into the worlds of transmigration, transmigratory life in the first place, is to see if you have enough power to pull yourself up and out of them. You might want to stay away from the Galapagos Islands if you have an interest in evolution. If you're going to do that, you might get stuck there for a few lifetimes or more. So this is, anyway, what I'm saying about oneness is a all-pervasive oneness, not 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, many varieties. They call that Vaichitra in Tantra. If you're stuck in Vaichitra, then you have moha, delusion. So getting stuck with counting a lot of things and trying to keep track of them all with the ego and so forth leads to delusion, moha. Those are several of the characteristics of Maya, the kind of hypnotizing effect it has on people. That they forget the true origins of things and they forget their self along with it. So it's one of the things that's warned against. So you can see the Jivan Mukta here is well past that, and is looking at everything as one Brahman in everything. It only appears to be divided. And that appearance is okay if it's availing power that's under its own auspice. but it's not okay if it gets into my mind and I believe it, that what it's showing me is true. I must know it to be false. It's the difference between the real and the unreal, or the actual and the non-actual. And Om Asat Vidyate Bhavo Nabhavo Vidyate Sataha, Krishna tells us in the Gita, that the unreal never is, and the real never ceases to be, but Ubayor Api Drishtantos Tu Anayos Tattva Darshibihi, the seers know the difference, darsha, and they see the difference between the real and the unreal, and they know them both. They don't just cast away the unreal and quickly go to the real, because then the unreal might linger, you see. So they come to know them both, and then they can get thee behind me, what's not, like Jesus said, the devilish things in the mind. Get those behind me and not have to worry about them coming back anymore. And that's the non-duality that these souls are abiding in part. Also, the third part is abide in stillness of samadhi. So finally, the Jivan Mukta has reached what the fifth stage was only calling deep sleep, right? It was getting some deep experiences in deep sleep and feeling formless awareness there, but didn't know what the hell was going on there, you see. And so it finally had to push the envelope and have samadhi. Maybe Ashmita, you say there's 4 kinds of samadhi basically in yoga, if you're looking at divisions of samadhi. And Sasmita is the ripe ego one. So that's where you're really courting the witness consciousness, where you have more detachment from the bliss you're getting from being ripened. But now you want to merge completely. So you're going to have to turn away from the bliss of the ripe ego to get to the ananda of samadhi, sananda, sasmita, you see. Patanjali describes it very well. And then you can get the asampragyata, that is the seedless samadhi. All those had seeds in them. Seeds of bliss, seeds of peace, seeds of I amness. But when that went away, then you had the Jivan Mukta. You were a living, liberated soul, and you had samadhi. There's much to say about that later. So that's Jivan Mukta, number 6, their stage that we refer to both then. So then, to continue on those slokas, beyond knots, remember knots? We went through about half hour of knots last week with you, called grantis. And so, because of that, I wrote a new God blog this week called Bhranti, Granti, and Shanti. So, Bhranti is delusion, Granti is knots it causes, and Shanti is the peace you want when you untie those knots. You get that. So basically we look through Granti, so that's what he's saying here in Sloka 39. Beyond knots. What else would he mean if it wasn't knots in the mind or knots in your life force? You see, because you untie those and then you've got health. You're looking out on peace. You're looking in on peace. May peace, peace, peace be to everyone, everywhere. And that's how the eye is seeing. And people who don't have that ability are not having peace down in the 3 worlds. You might have noticed. They're not even seeking it. Some of them prefer war. Same with the gods and the asuras. Quite often they prefer war. So beyond knots, all doubts vanquished, liberated in life, that's Jivan Mukta, devoid of imaginations, because in an earlier stage, in the 4th or 5th stage, he finally got over, actually an earlier stage, he finally got over the tendency to dream. Where is it? Right here, isn't it? First stage is an ambrosial sprout and is the eternal cleansed birthplace of the other 2 stages. Along these early stages, the 3rd stage is superior, for it is here that the sadhaka outgrows the tendency to imagine, and thereby get ensnared in his own mind and Maya. So the mind is in Maya, and you get yourself ensnared by using your mind in Maya, and then you pile more gloom on gloom. So it wouldn't be a popular thing in a culture that loves creativity sometimes for the wrong reasons. Let's create a lot of instruments of war, for instance, like nuclear-tipped missiles. But in any kind of a culture that loves creativity, they're going to love imagination. They're going to love dreaming. And they're going to love conceptualizing. And these are all things that the yogis are saying, no, don't love those things, get beyond them. And those are actually dangerous. That kind of knowledge leads to destruction. It's the inner knowledge that leads to liberation. So we part company about that time with our fellow Americans, or with the other nations on earth, or other races that think in that way, along the lines of Maya and ignorance. At least we have a word for it, and we know what to watch out for. Now we're learning how to withdraw more and more from it, detach, even if it's in 12 stages, like teaching of Vairagya goes. People walked in here to class today, and the word that was on everyone's lip was Vairagya, Vairagya. It was nice to hear that. If you walked into a worldly place, you'd probably just hear something about sweet cakes or the next party. So in that 39th sloka, some great lessons there. Devoid of imaginations, and whether extinguished or not, the sloka says, that one is like a painted flame. Remember, we ended with that last week. Whether extinguished or not, it's kind of hard to understand in English particularly, but that is whether the mind is using the mind to observe Maya, or whether it's not, and it went into formlessness. That's what it means. If my mind is dissolved, then no mind, no matter. No matter, never mind, as my teacher used to say. So if the mind withdraws itself into conscious awareness, then all of those things dissolve. It comes back, there they are again. So whether he's extinguished or he's not extinguished, he is like a painted flame. He's just staying steady. Has both ways that it can look, but is not involving in either way. It's already the Atman, pure and simple, and living in its own, as it said earlier in the slokas, living in its own sense of freedom. Then we had and that was actually the last sloka that we looked at, 6th stage. Let's start the 7th sloka so we make headway toward the end. Having dwelt in the 6th stage, that one will reach the 7th. The state of disembodied liberation is called the 7th stage of yoga. That's where we go beyond Jivan Mukta to Videha Mukti, you see there, disembodied freedom. The characteristics of it out front here are, he knows I am Brahman, illumined intelligence and bliss. He's in full comprehension of the direct experience of Om, which we're about to get to. He exists beyond conformity with the world, the body, and the Shastras. So Locus, Dehas, forms, names, forms, places, Locus, and then even the scriptures, the Shastras. He's not in conformity with them anymore. He dissolved them back. They came out of him, he dissolved them back into him. And that's the state he's living in now. Which is why you didn't see like Sri Ramakrishna keeping books around him or something like that. Or following the same commonplace conventions that people around him were into. Sometimes he did that just to encourage them. And finally, live free of superimpositions. So that's where you've got these sankalpa samskaras, where we'll take a look at that in a minute. But that gives us a little bit of a prelude, finishing up this chart, to look at the 7th stage and its conclusions. So let me read you the slokas now that we're going to be working on. So that's the state of disembodied liberation called the 7th state of yoga, Videha Mukti. And the next two slokas come together, 41 and 42. This is the acme of all stages. Beyond words, quiescent, avoiding conformity with the ways of the world, the body, and the scriptures, gets rid of all superimpositions over the self. And then he has 3 slokas on the word, 2 slokas on formlessness, and it's done. And we will hit that acme before the end of this 3-hour class. First, though, we need to take apart a little bit these slokas, 41 and 42. We've now effectively finished these 2 charts. One, the 7 stages themselves listed, and the 7 stages revisited with bullet points. You can look back on those on these charts. But when he says free of superimpositions, we know that this important word, which we don't have an equivalent for in English, called samskara, unless it be the word complex. And when you look at the word complex in Western psychology, there's a lot of negativity attached to it. And it's pretty much in the brain and from things that came from your upbringing. One lifetime alone scenario. But when you say the word samskara in India, it means, oh, those came from other lives. Those came from other lifetimes. Don't scare me like that. So basically, samskara is a word that is a watchword in any Indian darshana, any holy company you would get together with, gurus and sanghas and dharma teachers and discussions of dharma, meetings of dharmic householders. Oh yes, there's the samskaras. And they're talking about that in terms of their spiritual practice and their children, basically. Well, what kind of impressions is he or she showing now in their youth? You know, and they help each other look at that so that they can guide their youth out of negative samskaras, help them neutralize them early. That's called prarabdha karma, that came from sanchita karma. And so you want to definitely get that dissolved and worked out in this lifetime. And then they're also talking about enhancing the positive samskaras in a child. I remember even just in an artistic way, my father doing that with us kids when we grew up. It took all of us early on, and because we were showing musical aptitude and he noticed it. Had a teacher come in, observe us. Yes, they're all talented, they have music. And you might as well have gone up to him and said, your children have some scars from past lifetimes for music. But of course that wasn't what was being said. It just said, oh yeah, they have talent. So where it came from and how it came to you, and was it a blessing from God, or could have even been a curse later because you didn't make any money at it. And none of that was talked about, you see. So basically that's all got a word in Sanskrit, samskara, and knowing it ahead of time is good for you and good for your family. And of course for the illumined being has realized that that's one of the things that's going to have to go beyond samskaras. New samskaras for old, see, like new lamps for old. You want to replace your samskaras for commonplace existence. Well, those charts are gone already, but and replace them, samskaras, for scripture, and then replace those samskaras for meditation, and finally even for samadhi. You can develop samskaras for samadhi, and that's good to know when people come back to earth from that mahakasha, or from that witness consciousness. They'll keep a subtle body there, and they'll return to earth like Swamiji was said to have done here for us, to come to America in 1893, took on a body in India, and in fact at his birth, the astrologers, who are very deep in India, said, looking into his birth and the time of everything, and found out that he would be a perfect musician, he'd be a fine orator, but his real destiny was to be a spiritual teacher. So he had many samskaras of a very high and perfect order in him when he came here. So you can see that this is bringing consciousness down, if you want to put it simply, out to the earth, and not forgetting yourself. That's called smriti. Ya Devi Sarvabhuteshu, if you want to sing it, for instance. Sometimes out of the mother scriptures you'd sing that. Om Ya Devi Sarvabhuteshu Chaitaneti abhidiyate namastasyai 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 namo namaha. Ya Devi Sarvabhuteshu Vishnu Mayati Shabdgita namastasyai 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 namo namaha. Ya Devi Sarvabhuteshu Smriti Rupena Samstita Namastasyai 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 Namo Namah. Ya Devi Namo Namaha. Ya Devi Namo Namaha. Ya Devi Namo Namaha. Ya Devi Namo Namaha. And the verses go on and on. Ya Devi Sarvabhuteshu Mukti Rupena Samstita. You know, you exist in the hearts and minds of all beings as a desire to be free. But in this particular case, I was citing that one about Smriti Rupena Samstita, that there are memories in the samskaras of your mind that are very high of once having had samadhi, once having had a guru, once having had divine parents, once having had been born in an age of light instead of an age of darkness, and so forth and so on. Once having gotten over your desire for transmigratory existence. I remember that day when I didn't need to come back to earth anymore because of the force of my past karmas. I come back on my own auspices, freely, move from place to place. And then what can you do? You go from place to place and help them out of darkness. Maya's veils. So I put up these two charts now because we want to look at Sloka 41, 42. These are, again, kind of old warhorse charts, and I'm putting them side by side here so that we can see what a samskara is made out of. The probably easiest way to go to it is here, in this first one. That's the right one. Samskaras in the human mind. So you can see there in the quote, Sri Ramakrishna says, the body is born to work out its karmas from past lifetimes, or to be of service to others. It is all up to inborn tendencies called samskaras. Repeated births in this world make one believe that Maya is real. So he's not coming out of left field with all of that, those key words like Maya and samskaras. He's telling you that, he's giving you two reasons why people can come here, very general, because there are probably many sub-reasons to come here. But they're either coming here to work out their karma so they can get free, or they're coming here to be of service to others, to help others. It's a very nice generalization he made to simplify the explanation of why people are in the body. Why are we here? Where have we come from? Who are we? See, what did I do to get here? Or the mantra of people in bondage, why me? See? People in bondage are asking, why me? But what people who are seeking are saying, what? Who am I? Yes, who am I? They're getting deeper. And then people who are realized, what are they saying? I am that. Yes, see, I am Brahman. I am Atma Brahma. The great Mahavakyas. So you could say maybe 3 levels of people there. But that's a good assessment of Sri Ramakrishna, because he himself was born in the world. There's stotrams about that. Jaya Shri Ramakrishna Bhagavan Karuna Maya Jaya Kripa Nidana Jaya Shri Ramakrishna Bhagavan Karuna Maya Jaya Kripa Nidana Jaya Shri Ramakrishna Bhagavan Karuna Maya Jaya Kripa Nidana Kudi Rama Ke Tana Dulare Chandramani Me Ke Trigatare Jaya Shri Ramakrishna Bhagavan Karuna Maya Jaya Kripa Nidana. For 40 verses, that rolls on, all about the life of Sri Ramakrishna. And this first one is basically his father went to Gaya and had a pilgrimage and had a vision. And Vishnu came to him and said, I'm going to be born as your child. And he's at a holy place, purposely on pilgrimage, so as to realize God. It's something that Westerners probably don't do much, but And he's not expecting some vision from God. There he is at where Buddha gave his great talks, some of his great talks. And away from his wife, you see, young, still no children. Vishnu appears to him, I'm going to be born as your child. Meanwhile, back home, Chandra Devi, because it's said here, Mandir Vishnu Sattva Gunalai Tanudare Kudirama Ke Padare Mandira Manha Shiva Jyoti Shubhai Chandramani Ke Udara Samai. So Chandramani and Kudiram were the names of father and mother. And this is written by a man who's still living, this Stotra Mantra Ramakrishna. This Chalisa, I like to call it. Sri Ramakrishna Chalisa. And so the idea is that meanwhile, at the same time he's having his vision of Vishnu, Chandramani is back in the village of Kamarpakur at the Shiva temple. And all of a sudden a light comes out of the Shiva image and strikes her. And she feels like she's with child. And so that's Shiva coming out and Vishnu coming out to blend, you see. Usually you don't find those two together. And the Shaivites have one way of thinking, the Vaishnavas have another. But here is Ramakrishna, the integrator, Samanvaya Mahacharya, the great teacher about to take birth. So, we could go on. Maybe next week we're going to have classes on Bhakti Yoga, so that's where I really should be placing these kinds of teachings. But it's a good thing to bring it into the context here with samskaras, because he talks about these inborn tendencies that people have, and we're not looking at that at all in this day and age and in these Western cultures. It's just as far from our mind as possible. But it's the reasons for what we do and how we are, how we act, who we think who we are and who we're really not, and then who we truly are. All of that is based upon looking at your samskaras and your karmas. Those are two key words we need to look at. Karma has made it into the English dictionary a little bit. Samskaras is still floating out there somewhere. So, if you wanted to look into a mind, this is what I was saying here. The samskara definition is a mental impression formed via desire-based actions with the propensity to cause rebirth. I mean, this is my own definition that I would like to see in the English dictionary under noun, you see. A mental impression formed via desire-based actions with the propensity to cause rebirth. That says it all as closely as I could put it all together in one sentence for a dictionary, so that people would know reincarnation exists, you see. There's this cartoon my brother sent me, you see, so there's God with an old Western man, who's about to die. And they're standing side by side. And so God is showing three things to the man. One's a conventional worldly person, male, and a conventional worldly person, female, and a cow. That's what he's seeing. So the caption of the cartoon is, yes, reincarnation is true. Quit procrastinating. Choose one. So that's a person with not much choice to be born worldly like they were in a previous lifetime, man or woman, you see. But a cow, that's actually to me, that's very revealing, because they lived eating cows, you see. So you eat what you are kind of thing. So what are you going to be? Which side of the fence are you going to be on? But all these other possibilities, to be reborn a Jivan Mukta, or to be born a Dharmic householder, or all of these others are in there too. Paint that on a palette, that's what it looks like. So that's where I'm going to take you next. Palette for your future births, and what you can choose now, if you're consciously awake, if you're following 7 states of yoga, or 8 limbs of yoga. You want to re-empower yourself with this. Well, there's a go-around. We have to start on the lower left-hand side here, please, and I'll just show it to you. Root ignorance and tendencies towards cyclic transmigration exists as a samskara. So remember back here we had basically that you want to cross over transmigratory life. You want to get that out of the way. Well, life is okay. It's good and bad. It's mixed. But I don't want to be forced to come back here again. Unless it's my choosing and I come back in perfect consciousness, as Vivekananda said. Should we be born again? Oh, I hope you are not. Not until you can do so in perfect consciousness, he told a man. Told a Western man once here. So I'm giving you some scars. Some scar, is there in an unseen thing, not like some juices or some juices and so forth are flowing through your brain, but like some impressions are flowing through your mind. And do they have granthis, like we looked at last week? Because that's what you'd want to put up side by side with some scars, knots and tendencies. And unloose the knots, the tendencies get bettered. See, and you have more, the positive ones get emphasized, the negative ones get de-emphasized. And it's just like the difference between klista and aklista in the zone of the mind. Well, another samskara in this mind is birth, gender, life, personality, death, and rebirth are all vying for supremacy. Notice how nothing there about non-birth, or nothing there about non-duality is present there. It's got all the pretty much 6 transformations there. Put in hunger, thirst, decay, so forth. You'll have the full package. Another possible samskara is desire for pleasure and power. People come with that. I'm going through this quickly. The one above that is craving, ego obsession, urge to dominate others, body identification. So this side of the whole mind is all the negative samskaras you're looking at. It's beginning to head towards mixed samskaras. So this person's mind has agency, name, fame, selfishness, attraction to wealth, and lassitude in it. And so that's the last of the, probably what we'd call the negative samskaras that you'd want to dissolve. Dissolve through what? Through practices. What kind of practices? Not minor austerities like fasting or asanas or things. That's never going to get to the mind. If you can sit in one posture, good. You see, it could even be on a chair on the floor. It doesn't going to affect the mind where your body's sitting. So you have to get to your mind somehow. So you're going to want to get to it with something like this. This other person is born, or these other people are born with this samskara with lots of energy. You see, they don't have lassitude. They don't have tamas predominating. They have rajas. We know a lot of those being born in America. Morality becomes important to them. And that's the beginning of knowing what karma is about. You sow what you reap, reap what you sow. Proper orientation is becoming known to them, and altruism gets into the mix. So they start thinking about others as at least equally as themselves. And pretty soon that's going to become selflessness. I'm thinking about only others, as Vivekananda said. He said, I don't remember one action I ever did for myself. Amazing statement he made once. I don't remember one action that I ever did for myself. I've always done everything for others. And Holy Mother said much the same thing once, in her case. So it's like the self isn't there to care for in them. They don't have a self anymore. They just have this universal spirit. And it's very hard to imagine that. Maybe it'd be one of the better uses for imagination, is to try and imagine something really profound instead of all this stuff that's unreal and Mayic. So then a mixed samskara would also be aptitude for higher learning, positivity, and religious faith. You can see how those are very good, but they're not best, and they're not better. What's beginning to be better or best is the mental capacity and intelligence, which is what everyone's looking for in you, no matter what kind of teacher they are. If they're a high school teacher, college teacher, spiritual teacher, they're looking for those people who shine with intelligence. They have some sort of mental wherewithal within them by which they're going to be able to lift himself up and out of the commonplace run of things, the old repetitions of things. If that intelligence can shine forth and you can expand your mind's capacity with it, as the Upanishads state, then you know there's something very special in that person. And that specialness was in them wasn't placed there by God. It was placed there by their own self-efforts. So nobody's cursed or blessed by God. We've already described God as being beyond dualities, like virtue and vice, better and best, beyond all sorts of qualities and attributes. Leave it there and go to it in meditation. If you want to get to a good, better, and then best scenario, then you'll have a person who has a samskara for service, wisdom, compassion, peace, and illumination. We would like to see more and more of those people come to the three worlds. It's not a welcoming place, especially the physical earth, to come here. Time slows down and drags, and suffering drags with it, and karma drags with it, and people drag along with it. May God save them all, but save me from them, as Vivekananda said. It's people who tie themselves down to just the physical. We were talking about that on the way over in our drive to the ashram here. And finally, you have this ability for divine life and conscious embodiment. And that's where I want to show you the palette for future lives. But let's read these quotes first. Lord Vashishta, you'd say kind of the king of samskaras, I think. If you look at bookends all the way through India, all the way back to Ram and before, all the way forward to Ramakrishna, the person that's talking most about samskaras, evidently, I think, is Lord Vashishta. He says, the liberated soul embodies at will, utilizing the subtle force of pure desire, whereas other beings are dragged back into form via karma-based desires and the many samskaras that are duly formed thereby. So what came first? Chicken and the egg? Let's forget about that. That's on the physical level. Let's ask what came first, karma or samskaras? Because then we're entertaining a subject that can really benefit us. And so the answer is, it's impossible to determine. Don't vex your head about it, because they just play into each other. In other words, the final answer is that it's all beginningless. You can't find a beginning to it. There are none. There's only appearing to be them, and that's when you take time into consideration. So desires and samskaras are feeding into each other and feeding each other all the time through an indeterminable period of time that has no beginning and has no end. And so that's a Galapagos island you probably don't want to go to and look into. See, you want to just decide, it's beginning, middle, and endless, now let's see where I am in it. How does the Atman behave under the force of name? How does the Atman behave under the force of form? How does the Atman behave in the problem of time? How does the Atman behave in the problem of space? How does the Atman behave when it's forced with, when it's faced with karma? Take the Maya and put the Atman to it, and see for yourself how the Atman's reacting or not, or how it's changing or not, or how it's dealing with or not the fivefold Maya as it comes upon you. And that's the question, how? I just wrote a God blog about that. You can ask what, where, when, and why, and that's pretty much name, form, time, and space. But when you ask who, you begin to go deeper, see, into the true nature, beyond the ego, to the witness. And then there's one other question, the sixth question you can ask, especially here on earth, is how. How do I, means what kind of method do I use to find out who? And to satisfy the questions of where did I come from, what am I, when did I arrive, when will I leave, birth and death, all those things. So that's a good one. He also says, through the newly engendered body, a series of dream lives are conjured up by the mind's power of sankalpa. A third word we should add into this. Mental projection, I chanted about it at the beginning. What does the yogi do with his mental projections? Nothing. He just lets them rise and fall and watches them. And if some of them won't fall, he'll dissolve them back into water, like bubbles. See? So if he's watching the life processes of himself, his family, his race, his world, his loka, his realm, and then he's watching for those things that persist, those he will forcibly dissolve back into the water of consciousness like bubbles and get rid of them. They're persisting because of the collective mind. But for himself, it doesn't matter. He just watches them rise and fall. So he doesn't attach to them at all. That's a high stage of detachment you're talking about there. So this power of samkalpa is the residue of egoic actions. Done therein, collect in the mind as samskars. So other things on this chart are there, but that's basically how to define a samskara and pull it apart and look at it in its negative, mixed, and more pure appearance. So let's go immediately then to, so we could go deeper into samskaras, and I'm going to have to pace ourselves to get to the second half for that new chart. But let's look more importantly then at this palette of conscious future births chart. We don't take it out much. I was about to show it at the last retreat and we ran out of time. And remember, this is all taking apart sloka 41 and 42 of the Akshi Upanishad, which says, the seventh state is the acme of all stages. Videha mukti, I'm free of all bodies now. And now I'm quiescent, and Sun God tells him, avoid conformity with the ways of the world anymore, and avoid conformity with the body. And also, no need to study the scriptures anymore. You are a walking scripture at that point, and it just comes out of you. All the study you did before was just to perk the power of a samskara in you that is called, I know the scriptures. Probably want to bring that with you, you see, if you want to teach people how to get free. Where's my samskara of the Dharma? Oh, there it is. I'll bring it out, you see, and manifest it for people. Then I'll put it away because I don't really need it anymore, you see. It's kind of that level of 6th and 7th stage of yoga. And when you do take a samskara out and open it up like that, powerful, deep dimensions. Onward, going on and on like Ramakrishna. Just talking on and on about Dharma and higher things too. And get rid of all superimpositions over the self. Vivarta, adhyasa. Those are words in Sanskrit that mean a covering kind of power, like Avarana Shakti. Just covers things, you know. Try and uncover it. So, if, as the earliest stage said, give up transmigratory life, look how far that's come in a short time when it comes down to give up all false superimpositions and conformity with the body. So you're not taking bodies anymore, are you? You don't have to. You're not forced to. And so that bodiless condition, you know, is now up to you. You can fly in the great Mahakasha in meditation like a great bird. Some birds can even fly across the whole ocean. They're so powerful. So this ability then is the ability of the Videha Mukti, as we see back here, or I'm sorry, the Videha Mukta, that has mastered the ability, if you could call it that, of bodilessness. So that means that can come down to the 6th stage and look out, as we said, and can also look into Brahman, the formless reality. Can swim like a huge fish in an ocean of awareness, as Ramakrishna said. And that's how he felt when he was there. So there are some things to say about formless awareness. So this being then has the ability to take on bodies consciously. So we could go from a Videha Mukti state to a Jivan Mukta state, or stay in the Jivan Mukta state and produce bodies for the good of humanity. Like Swami Vivekananda saying, I may find it very wonderful and I may be very free when I get out of this body, but I'll not give up. I'll keep coming back and taking bodies so that I can help even one person get out of bondage. Even one person I'll take bodies for. So that's, I mean, you probably couldn't find a better example very readily in history of a person who epitomizes both Jivan Mukta and Videha Mukta in himself than Swami Vivekananda. In other words, you don't see the avatars coming back every 100 years, like a Swamiji would. Reading the Gospel of Ramakrishna yesterday, and Ramakrishna said, let's start talking about Vivekananda's last verse. Oh, he was born in this family, he was born in that family. I didn't even remember reading that in the Gospel before. So he took births that were like hidden from people. Not just, this time he came out, you see. And Sri Ramakrishna himself is looking back at Vivekananda's past lifetimes. He said, well, yeah, I take birth in that family. I couldn't find him. And then he took birth in that family. So this is a being that's using the covering power, whereas other beings are getting used by the covering power. So the Sun God wants you to be rid of all superimpositions. This is like his final instructions to Samkriti, who's asking about light, the light of awareness. The last instruction he really gives. Then he goes into Om, then he goes into formless, description of formlessness in 2 slokas. So the final thing is give up all these superimpositions. The last instruction the Sun God gives to him before Samkriti comes out of his meditation and finds himself back in his physical form. So if we look at this quickly before our break, Sri Sharda Devi, another expert on this whole process of reincarnation, samskara, and sankalpa, says, human being, today it is, tomorrow it is not. No one will accompany a person after death. Only actions, good and bad, follow, even after death. The result of karma is inevitable, but karma's effects can be counteracted greatly by japa and austerities. So this is why you want to consult the revealed scriptures and find out those tools like the 4 yogas, which other people are overlooking and sort of casting away. And do these practices that really amount to something in a short time. Get rid of the false superimpositions of Maya. Name, form, time, space, and causation first, and then any kind of admixture of those that has managed to insinuate itself in your mind as a samskara and is still lingering there. And, put the laser to it. This is, again, with the 7 stages, all done inside of you after you got rid of your desire to transmigrate. Worked. Before we look at these palaces, let's take Lord Vashishtha's advice again. Ego plus mind plus intelligence, and adding in the 5 senses, make up this temporal unit called the psychophysical being. When considering it and its powers, we must remember that when these 8 facets are kept in pure state, Kundalini Shakti loves to sport in this amazing form. Okay. So why waste a lifetime? See, a visit to the psychophysical complex or the body-mind mechanism. Why waste a lifetime? Nothing can limit you if you're in awareness of that. And particularly if you keep these mechanisms pure when you enter them, that Kundalini Shakti gets attracted to you, like she did to Sri Ramakrishna. And these are put a little bit randomly, but if you want to start planning right now for your next lifetime, come see me and we'll pick the things that are good for you. And we'll also try and see which things are in your way to achieving those good things. But basically what you're going to want to do is, as we're talking about right now, attain Jivan Mukti. And if you can't, then hopefully look at those people who have. They've attained Jivan Mukta in a past lifetime. So there you have what I was talking about with Swami Vivekananda. They arrive free, and it doesn't take them very, very long to see through false superimpositions especially around themselves, but also around the collective mind. They'll see they'll look at the whole human race and say, you are bound because of these few things. I'll make it this simple for you. And here's the few practices you can do to get free from those few things. And it's very simple, see, to them. They're not making it complex. And that can only be done by not a master, a past master. So you'd want to attain liberation in this lifetime, as the Buddhists say, and then be a bodhisattva by the end of your lifetime, a free soul. And then, if you're coming back, you'll come back as a free soul. And you'll be able to select the country and culture of your choice. That would also mean, I don't think I put it up here, I did, the one underneath it, choosing dharmic parents prior to entering into the womb. Here in this day and time, we're putting together the teachings of India, Vedanta, Yoga, and Tibetan Buddhism to flesh out our understanding of a palette that we can paint for a future life. These are all great beings that have said this in these different runs of philosophy in India. And so this is what they actually say in their scriptures. Yes, choose your own parents. Not only are they saying that to you, they're pointing to the Dalai Lama, who chose his own parents, then passed away. Then they went looking for him again and found him as the baby of another set of parents in Tibet. There's films about this, if you've seen them. And so we're having some people doing this like hiding in plain sight kind of thing. All you need to do is really look and say, oh, popped up again there, you see. Oh, which number Dalai Lama are you now? Do you recognize this from your last lifetime? Gaga goo goo. See, I'll take that back now. I'll need that. Enlightened by the age of 6, like Shankara. Hiding in plain sight. So you just have to get rid of these false superimpositions yourself by seeing how they did it. You can then, I'm kind of going in a random order, but somewhat sensible, you can arrange life circumstances in order to neutralize karmas that you're carrying. And you can also assume gender and physical body of your choice. There are cases where people have great souls, they've even chosen to take on blindness or an infirm body to help others. So they have their look on collective humanity. They'll have their look also on specific souls, especially those ones that have been attending upon them in previous lifetimes, like students with gurus. They'll keep that smriti, that divine memory there. See, and they'll say, that soul needs help. See, so that soul took initiation with me, so I'll make sure that they're connected into the Dharma. Beautiful poems by Milarepa about that, actually, in Tibetan Buddhism. Oh, you children who live in towns infested by dark karmas, make sure you keep your connection with the Dharma, he says in one of his songs, his spontaneous songs he sings. In Tibet, he's looking at villages, you see, where people are practicing dark things, see, holding on to their ignorance. So he sings a song about it, you see. Stay away from those towns. Remain in solitude. Study these scriptures. Find a teacher and you'll find your way. Right? Just sings this to you. The only ones we haven't looked at in the top 2 rows is in the far left. Spiritual practice and attainment in previous lives. So if we look back at the samskara charts, we'd find out that some of those samskaras that are there on those 24 by 36 images are accompanied by these people who have practiced in a previous lifetime and therefore come into life readily. The teachings are just understood by them right away, whereas others are still puzzling them. So a picture the other day of a Tibetan monk with 2 scriptures, and he's beating them against his head like this with a frown on his face. See? Can I grok these scriptures? Can I understand them? Is this the first time I'm doing this? Or is it just like easy for me? I read that, of course that's the truth. I want more. Give me more. And the more you focus on that, the more the other goes away. The longer you can keep your attention focused on Brahman, the longer the world stays away from you. How about going down the rows? Experiencing a conscious death at the end of the last lifetime. So this is all something, if you're a divine painter, you want on your, on your creation. You see, for your next lifetime, you're going to paint it in there. I mean, look at the brushes and the paints there. The purple is pure will, the red is cosmic wisdom, the white is clear mind, of course, the yellow is strong intention and resolve, and the black is spiritual adeptship, the green is farsightedness. These are all paints you're dipping your mind brush into to paint your future lifetime, is the idea. And these are all the things that you're going to want to paint into your image of a perfect life. A perfectly conscious life. So experience a conscious death at the end of this lifetime would be one of the penultimate things. You don't go to your death brooding, unhappy, ignorant of the scriptures, having betrayed yourself and your Sangha and your Guru, things like that. And we want to keep the Dharma first and foremost. Across the board there is setting up the manifestation of one's work and mission in life. So then you can come back and truly, like the Blues Brothers, be on a mission from God. See? Therefore, you're not just mouthing it or pretending it or hoping for it. You're really all set for it, and you've dictated the circumstances of your life, like, say, Swamiji being a sannyasin of sannyasins, and helping to find the Ramakrishna order. That was all preset. You see, that's what he was destined to do. And because he did that, thousands and thousands of souls followed him. Unbelievable how that could happen in such a short time when you look at it. That's why my God blog I'm running is called Mott and Mission Impossible. Because that's what he did. He actually talked people out of living selfish lives and giving their whole life towards service and freedom. So even put that in the motto of Ramakrishna Order. Free yourself and then help others to be free. An interesting order he put that in too. And of course these last two would be sort of a given, and they lead us on into these next slokas of the Akshi Upanishad. Sincere compassion to help all beings gain spiritual emancipation. I've realized the gold of my own consciousness now, O Mother. Now I want to use that gold to build a golden temple. And in that temple I want to invite everyone in with me to worship and meditate upon Thee. There's a song in India. There's those kinds of lines. So he wants to build this golden temple of his own purified consciousness, free of dross, and invite everyone in to meditate. And beautiful songs they have. So that's how dedicated they are to helping all these suffering souls to get free. And finally, the last painting there, you might say, in your gallery of a new lifetime, would be non-dual perspective that transforms all appearances into reality. So you're going to need that and want that if you come here amongst people who are seeing falsity everywhere, who are living in false superimposition. That's the way they live. That's natural to them. And revelation is entirely out of possibility for them. The final quote there, now that we know what's in our gallery for next lifetime for all of us, because we're going to run right home right now and start planning our next lifetime, aren't we? Consciously. If you haven't done it already, maybe I'm preaching to the choir. So Sri Ramakrishna's story about samskaras comes in here. The potter puts his pots in the sun to dry, both baked and unbaked. A cow happens to walk over them and breaks some of them. The baked pot shards that are broken he throws away, but the soft ones, though broken, he gathers up and shapes them into a lump. From this lump he forms new pots. In the same way, so long as a man has not realized God, he will have to come back to this earth, to the potter's hand. So the potter's hand is, the creative hand there is not a good thing. You're not picking that up. You do not want to reform another body, not in ignorance. And so that holy cow, that cow that walked through and amongst all those pots, broke the baked ones, their thing, they're calling that cow a holy cow. Thank you. You broke the last body that I'll ever have. But the ones that were just still soft and just caved in, those are going to be reshaped again. So those are souls that haven't yet merged all their processes into Divine Mother, as Patanjali says. I'll share that sloka with you at the end of class, at the end of the second half. So a quick run through this chart, which we very seldom get to see, but it's very demonstrative and plugs right in with this kind of underlying teachings that the 7 stages don't give you. You can look at them, you can look at their breakdown, you can read the slokas, but what's underneath all the mentions are things like knots and stages and samskaras and goals and sub-goals, everything that we've been looking at in terms over these classes with this beautiful Akshitam Upanishad, Third Eye Upanishad. Now we are about at the end of our first half, so I think we can bridge into it in the remaining few minutes by at least taking up and reading the next slokas, because now he has given you 2 slokas on the 7th stage. Like I said, everything's less and less to say as you go deeper and deeper into the towards the highest stages. And so now at the end, what you have there is basically just this, you see. Lives free of superimpositions, exists in beyond the conformity with the world, in full comprehension of Om and I am Brahman, illumined intelligence and bliss. That's put in these slokas this way, because we just took apart 41 and 42. So here's Akshi Upanishad 42b. All that is here, the Vishva, the Pragya, etc., is nothing but Om. Who can tell me what that sounds like real quick?
Upanishad.
Which one?
Mandukya.
Exactly like the Mandukya Upanishad, which only has 12 slokas to it, whereas this has 48 or 48. So there you see how the Upanishads, the rishis who composed them, are all in concurrence about this great origin of all things, the Word. I'll show you about that chart after the break, first thing, how the Word explains these few slokas here. That's 42b. Now 43 says, oh, by the way, all that is here, the Vishva, the Pragya, etc., is nothing but Om. Then he begins to explain it. Because there is non-difference between import and expression, and because as distinct from each other, neither of these two is known. He's talking about waking and dreaming. The Vishva is just the letter A, and U is said to be the Taijasa. So the individual being Vishva is A, and then the Taijasa is allocated with deep sleep, is U, dreaming basically. And so you're going into a higher state of things. The Pragya is the letter M. That's what he says next. Thus know in order, discriminating with great effort before Samadhi sets in. And that's probably the most key sloka in the whole Upanishad, I think. It's short, right to the point. Thus know in order, discriminating with great effort, know this before Samadhi sets in. So that's why people, samadhi can occur to them, Sri Ramakrishna says, like a lotus opening the sun. But as soon as a cloud goes in front of the sun, they lose it. So they can't hold on to samadhi. And so what would be the solution for that? Know these systems in order and implement them after putting forth great effort into knowing them before you attack the 8th limb of yoga or the 7th stage of Akshi Upanishad yoga. You'll never become a Jivan Mukta or a Videha Mukta if you don't have that order in place and put forth great effort in understanding it. So I can read you that much. And then we have 45, 6, 7, and 8 talk about, with my new chart, the revelation of formless awareness, which I'll show you after the break. But we'll take apart 42, 43, and 44 after the break, all about Om. I'll show you the 4 stages of Om. So here I think is a good time probably to end our first half. Thank you for your kind attentions. We'll complete the Akshi Upanishad after our break.
Babaji.
Ja.